When I got the call, they said, oh, Carnegi Deli, you've got a quintuple, 5 homicides.
When we got to the scene, we had a hell of a lot of people outside, and also the restaurant was jammed. The uniform closed the place down. We want to keep the crowd there so we can interview them. Try to get witnesses as quickly as you can.
I get up there and I get briefed by the detectives.
So at the scene, there was 3 likely and 2 DOAs. 3 people who are likely are gonna go to the emergency room, they're gonna go to the hospital. I can't imagine laying there, hearing the shots go off and knowing that you're next.
You can't shoot 5 people in New York. They're gonna hunt your ass down. They're gonna find you.
Every single case takes a little piece out of your soul.
You cannot do this job unless you really care.
You want to find out the truth. That's what detectives do.
I've always liked the peek behind the curtain. What really happened?
It's so important for a family to know who murdered their relative. I mean, that's my job.
In New York City, the NYPD, this is it.
I love New York. I grew up in Alphabet City on 10th Street in housing projects. My parents were very strict with me. I was never allowed to do a thing. But we used to cut out of high school and go to movie theaters on 42nd Street. It was a real grungy area for a long time. You had the peep shows, you had all the pedophiles in the arcades.
But it had color, it had life. It also had quite a bit of business for me, most unfortunately.
When I became a cop in the 80s, it was still really high crime.
Police officers were hired in the 1980s, kind of cleaned up those streets in the 1990s.
By 2001, Broadway was at one of its peaks. Theaters were all crowded every night, and the Carnegie Deli was a thriving, I mean, people would wait online to get in there.
It's bright and it's crazy and it's filled with tourists dislocating their jaws on huge sandwiches.
It was right next to the theater that Letterman filmed, so people flocked there. It was a landmark.
So it's a Thursday. I worked earlier in the day and was done. And I was at the ball field coaching my son's baseball game. The game just ended when I get the call. When you start saying it's in Midtown Manhattan and you start mentioning a landmark like Carnegie Deli, I have to get up there as soon as possible. In retrospect, I probably should have put a suit on. I did not. I show up, I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt.
The crime that took place in that building was on the top floor apartment, not in the restaurant. 5th floor was where everything took place.
We spoke to the super, we speak to the neighbors, we do canvases and find out if anybody can tell us who these people are.
The cooperation from the deli downstairs. We identified Jennifer Stoll.
It's her apartment.
I remember standing in the doorway of the apartment building and seeing this guy coming down the stairs taking pictures. And I don't know everybody in crime scene by name, but I think I know everybody in crime scene by now. I've been around long enough, and I'm like, I don't even see crime scenes called. Who's this guy taking pictures? So I remember it went something like this, like, who are you? And what are you doing in my crime scene? Are you in crime? No, I'm not. Well, then who are you? I'm the police commissioner's photographer. And I'll tell you exactly what I said. You can decide to bleep it out. I don't give a fuck who you are. Get out of my fucking crime scene.
Perino's not a kiss ass. A case like this, everybody wants to come and look. But when you're in charge of the crime scene, no matter who the boss is, you got to tell them you can't come in.
You get upstairs, and inside, they're on the floor with two bodies, face down, with their hands behind their back, tied up in duct tape, and shot in the head.
They didn't break in. Door's not broken down. So that gives you some clue.
Barbara Butcher was like having another detective there, but a detective who knew more than you.
I was a medical legal death investigator working for the Office of Chief Medical Examiner in New York. We go to that scene and investigate the body. We work with the police. The scene belongs to them. The body belongs to me. 4 people had been lined up and shot. 2. And there was blood in a rectangle down the living room floor. And then the smears of blood where 2 of the people had been pulled away by EMTs. And then I photographed the wounds and the bindings tied behind the back, ankles tied, things like that. One of the detectives saying to me, let me take you in where we think the first shooting occurred, the first victim. That was Jennifer Stahl. Somebody told me that she was the owner of the apartment and had been removed because she still had a pulse. Even though the body isn't there, I still need to collect whatever evidence, whatever story I can about that person if they're likely to die. And we went back to a little recording studio. She had this wonderful little creative thing, the kind of thing I would like. And I had a flash of sadness. And to see blood in that little, sweet little studio, it was not good. You want to be careful not to let your emotions get away with you. So, quick, boom, let's close the lid on that. Let's tamp that right the hell down. Let's get about our business.
I remember walking into the apartment, it becomes apparent that this is a place of business.
This was not the nickel bag in Washington Square Park cut with oregano kind of pot dealing. She was dealing high-end marijuana.
We discovered drugs and money missing.
Right away, we're gonna think it's a robbery gone bad. But the fact that you have 5 people tied up, 4 people on the floor, that's very unusual, especially in Midtown. Like, that doesn't really happen there.
All shot in the head, back of the head, execution style.
We can think that it could be a personal thing. We could think it might be a domestic thing where Jennifer might have had a problem with a boyfriend or, or somebody else. The fact that Jennifer Stahl was selling weed wasn't important to us. Even though marijuana was illegal then, we were more concerned that 5 people got shot.
The media was all over it from the beginning. They caught wind of it the night it happened.
Detectives and crime scene investigators searched for clues hours after 2 men and a woman were killed and another man and woman hospitalized.
A friend of mine called and was like, Mish, did you turn on the TV? Did you see the news? There's been a shooting at Jen's. They were interrupting TV shows.
The massacre that happened right above the Carnegi
In an
Deli.
execution-style shooting inside the building were bound and gagged with duct tape.
She had broken her finger and had a surgery. You could see the cast on her hand, and I knew it was Jen. I knew it was her.
With the media pressure came more resources, which was very helpful.
Manhattan is divided for police department purposes, Manhattan North and Manhattan South. So the dividing line is 59th Street. Manhattan South handles everything south of 59th Street, down to the Battery, river to river. Each borough has several precincts. Each of those precincts has a detective squad. Homicide squads come in as a support group when a homicide drops in one of those precincts.
The case was assigned to Midtown North Precinct. So it's Manhattan South homicide.
You need personnel. The more personnel, the more information you're going to get. You want to get Manhattan North homicide down there.
We would be called to assist them. They never would be called to assist us.
Manhattan South, we always call them Manhattan Soft. Cops that work in Manhattan North are tougher, so you always kind of like, there was like this whole competition. When I went to work in Manhattan South, I totally changed my opinion. Manhattan South, you have to really use your head and your investigation skills because a lot of the cases were like stranger on stranger homicides, and a lot of the perpetrators come from New Jersey, Brooklyn, Queens, they can come from anywhere.
There were witnesses on the scene who saw a red car driving away, close proximity to the deli. These bits of information, when they're put together, it's either going to fit into the pattern of the investigation or it's going to just get ruled out. But everything is worthy of a look.
It's a full court press to find out as much as we can.
First of all, we identify Jennifer Store, it's her apartment. From there, we have to identify all the victims that are there.
All your effort goes into identifying the person before it even goes into figuring out what happened.
You do victimology. You look into their backgrounds. We had a gang database, and you're going to run them through that database. Check with narcotics to see if they knew any individuals that were there, nicknames, phone numbers, things like that.
The DOAs were Stephen King and Charles Hollowell.
Jennifer didn't make it. She died probably just a few hours later. Gunshot wound to the head. And the other two, by a miracle of God, despite being shot in the head, they survived.
I just feel like somebody was watching out for me. That definitely my mother was with me or something like that. And God was on one shoulder and my mother was on the other. Because, yeah, that was close. I was shot on my right side, behind my ear and right at the bottom of my hairline. And then the exit came out above my occipital bone. So it just basically followed the curvature of the skull and came out, which is a lucky thing, because I think if it went in, I wouldn't be here probably. I never left my spot because I didn't know. I was in like this big puddle of blood, and I didn't know if I would lodge, if the bullet was still in me, if I would lodge the bullet in me, or if I was going to die. I didn't know. So I just stayed where I was. Once I thought that they were gone is when I got my hands untied from the gaffer's tape and reached for my cell phone in my pocket and called 911 and then just kept making phone calls. I didn't know, I just wanted to say goodbyes to some of my friends.
The two that survive, we're trying to get statements out of them.
The detectives were there right from when I got to the hospital. I just told them, what I knew. I mean, what I saw.
We found out the victims, they were all like theater people in the arts. And I understood that one of the living victims was the fiance of one of the DOAs.
I told the police officer. I walked in and Jen introduced me to a couple, Rosamond and Trey, that were up from St. John. They were all sitting around just having a glass of wine. She just asked me to join them, and I did. My intent was just to go there and give her a trim and get weed. I'm a hairstylist, so we did a little bartering. About 15 minutes after I got there, there was a buzz at the door. It was almost like a little bit of a blur of two people coming in, but you could tell from the size of them. One was taller than the other one was better looking than the other one. I didn't know them from Adam. The taller one of the two took a gun out from his waistband and said, everybody get down on the ground and put your arms behind your back. I mean, I just did what I was told, and I thought maybe that would keep it from, anything escalating, but one of them took my friend Jennifer into the other room. I remember her saying, please just take whatever you want, just don't hurt my friends. And with that, it's when I heard the first gunshot go off. And I guess he killed her right there. I just didn't hear her again after that. So I knew then this is it. I figured there wasn't going to be anything else.
In New York City, there's no telephone notifications when someone dies. It's face to face.
You got to go knock on this person's door in the middle of the night or middle of the day and tell them that someone in their family is deceased. I mean, that's really the hardest part.
Those words don't come out of your mouth easy. To say that their loved one has been murdered, tragically like this and senselessly, and I think there's another level to it, and you can just feel it, like when people learn it for the first time. So it's just it's not an easy thing.
It was May 11th that we found out. My mom and dad, they were on the Cape, and a police officer came to their house.
My mother was watering her flowers in her bathrobe, and
at like 6 a.m.
Two policemen walked down the driveway and said, "Are you Karen Hellowell?" And she just said she had this huge sinking sensation. Yeah. And they're like, is your husband here? And he was, and so they sat them down, and then they told them the news that Trey was dead.
Yeah.
Our lives were forever changed that day.
2 days later was his birthday, and it was lilac season. He absolutely loved lilacs. He was born and he died in lilac, the height of its glory.
Mm-hmm. We knew Trey was coming to New York to meet Rosamond's family and to attend a cousin's wedding.
And they were supposed to stay at Jennifer Stahl's Carnegi Deli apartment.
Yeah.
And so that's how they ended up there.
My heart goes out to them. Rose's mom came to visit Jen, but I felt it was really sad because Trey didn't really know Jen. Just, a friend of a friend hanging out with her.
In this case, we raised 18 fingerprints between inside the apartment and on the banister, but we collected no ballistic shells. So that tells you something there. 5 shots, you don't find any shells, you're probably looking at a revolver.
Maybe they threw a weapon, the gun, in the sewer. We call DEP. We look at the garbage here. We have people looking in garbage cans that are on the street. You're doing everything to get as much information as possible.
There had been a surveillance camera installed in the staircase. That night, they discovered that.
The surveillance video depicted 2 male blacks. One had dreads and a hoodie, and the other one had shorter hair.
In my history and the hundreds of homicides I worked on, only one, other than this, had video in. So I was surprised when I saw the tape. I was like, whoa, this is very good.
We knew that those people were suspects. There's some people that we wanted to get into contact with and speak to. This case happened at 7:30 p.m. We worked around the clock in the same place. In Jennifer's apartment, there was an answering machine. It was blinking. We hit play. Her friend was asking, is she okay? That she hadn't heard from her, and she was wondering where she was.
I had called Jennifer's house while the murders were happening.
Based on that message, we needed to interview her friend and find out why she was worried about her. You know, why was she concerned that Jennifer wasn't answering her phone?
The morning of May 11th, homicide detectives walked into my house. They looked like they were off of a set of NYPD Blue. And they asked me questions about her business. I said to them, it was a place to gather.
It was just like friends hanging out and people smoking, talking.
So there were people that you met in passing, but we didn't necessarily become friends.
Jennifer sold weed to support her artwork.
We learned that she was an actress that was in Dirty Dancing.
But her music was more of an interest to her at that point than dancing and acting was. Her recording studio was the room that she dealt pot out of. She did also love to bring friends in and record with them too.
People that came in and out of Jennifer's apartment were Jennifer's friends.
It was just getting busier. I think it just seemed sort of chaotic to her, sometimes hard to manage, and her buzzer going off. And occasionally she would have a friend there who would help manage the door.
Stephen was there working that night, answering the door for her.
She was basically dealing to her friends and people that she knew in the industry.
She dealt with some famous people, Saturday Night Live cast, things like that. Her clientele was like well vetted. She had to know you. If you said, oh, so-and-so sent me, I don't think you're getting buzzed up into Jennifer's apartment. She was ultra careful.
This was very hard for us as her friends because if they wanted something from Jen, she would have given it to them. There was no reason to shoot 5 people. I saw Jen just a few days before her murder, and she was quite upset. Jennifer had been fighting with her boyfriend. I believe she was trying to leave and he grabbed her hand, and so her finger got broken. One of the suspects was the black man with long dreads. I felt very certain that her boyfriend had killed her because he fit that description.
With the information we got from Barbara, we got Jennifer Stoll's boyfriend's name, and then we had to go interview him. There's some domestic issues going on there, so we had to make sure that he was not involved in this homicide.
I was positive that it wasn't her boyfriend. I didn't think he looked anything like him. And I met him and he was always very nice to me, and I don't think that he would do something like that.
We interviewed Jennifer Stoll's boyfriend, but he was ruled out based on the information he gave us as to where he was, you know, what he was doing. We knew that he was not the perpetrator.
When he called me, he said I had to get a lawyer. Everybody thought it was me. I said, yes, I thought it was you. And he said to me, how could you have thought it was me? I loved her. I said, you guys were fighting. She had a broken finger and they said a black man with long dreads left the scene. I said, who was I to think? He said, how could you think I would hurt her? I apologized to him.
After I was released from the hospital, the detectives had told me that Rosamond's going to be in there a lot longer, that, you know, the bullet lodged in her jaw. We didn't know each other. We just were both the victims of an awful circumstance, her more so than me. I mean, she lost her, you know, her other half. So I can't even imagine.
As the prosecutor, I have to extract as much information as I can, as quickly as I can, but also be mindful of the fact that This is traumatic to talk in detail about something that they just want to forget. I remember speaking to Rosamund 2 days later. Rosamund was describing how the sound of the gunshots were coming closer and closer to her, and she was next in line. She heard the shot that killed her fiance, Charles Helliwell.
I can't imagine laying there, hearing the shots go off and knowing that you're next.
If it was the last thing that she was going to do, she was going to turn around and see the person who killed her. And she moved and turned her head at the very last moment before she was shot, and that may very well have saved her life. Rosamund said that the initial buzzer ring was answered by Stephen King, and she heard Stephen King say, "It's Sean," to Jennifer, and Jennifer said, "Okay, let him up." And so it was at that point that we had initially the name Sean. We didn't have a last name, but we had at least a first name for one of the two people.
The two main leads we had were the fact that there was a name of Sean and the fact that there was the video. Those are the two main things we had to go on. I know that there's a number of prints that are removed, but we don't know the value or whether it's going to lead us to anything, or whether it was the police commissioners.
They interviewed several people that purchased weed from her that were friends with her. They were trying to run down whatever leads they could and try and make connections, because it could be somebody that knows him and knows the person Sean.
When I saw the video footage, I didn't recognize Sean. I really didn't know who it could have been.
When we were searching the apartment and the crime scene, after the initial forensic collection is made, then you go back in looking for leads, things that aren't forensically connected, pieces of paper, photographs, this kind of thing. And we found a resume which gave us the first steps to a Sean.
Apparently, he was a roadie for George Clinton and the Parliament Funkadelic.
Jen always tried to connect people to create things. And that was really a big part of what she did.
They went to the address that Sean Sally had listed on his resume, and he wasn't living there. He had left that place.
We were concentrating on Sean, and we ended up with numerous addresses in New Jersey.
Detectives had contacted every single person just about in his life that he knew. One of those individuals viewed the videotape from the Carnegie Deli and recognized Sean Sally. Significantly, they knew the second person who we were trying to identify. They knew his nickname was Dre.
So they started to run him down.
We're going to different homes, interviewing people, and we go to, and I recall it as his girlfriend's home.
She knew someone named Dre, her boyfriend / common law husband, Andre.
Andre wasn't there. I was the only one who had business cards. I think that's why my card gets left. Sunday morning, the 20th, we get a phone call at the office. It's Andre, and he's willing to talk to us.
Andre Smith showed up, ironically, in a red car that fit the description of the car that a witness saw driving away in close proximity to where the murders occurred.
When Andre Smith came in, we asked him if he can give us a set of prints, which he agreed to, and he took his prints.
I can only assume that he thought he was going to be smart enough to keep us at bay and never get trapped into anything, but totally show cooperation. I'm assuming that was his goal.
The first two people who spoke to him had him in the room for a long time, and these are like senior detectives. They were senior to us. They continued speaking to him for hours, and then when they weren't getting anywhere, then the next team comes in, fresh people who slept all night.
It's kind of like this endless supply of pinch hitters until you find the pinch hitter that makes the connection, and then you run with it.
Billy and Tommy Bedell go in there and they start trying to talk to him.
He denied being in Manhattan, denied being at the scene, denied not having any knowledge of who Sean Sally was. I showed him still photos of the video surveillance tape, and Andre Smith's face is right there, like for him to see. And nope, he denied it. It was like, he was like that, what was that song, that Shaggy song, It Wasn't Me?
He does a very good job at denying it, but keep on talking. And there's always, the detectives always joke about the levels of denial. I don't know what you're talking about, I wasn't there. Well, I know what you're talking about, I wasn't there. Well, I know what you're talking about, I was there, but I didn't do it, to eventually, I know what you're talking about, I was there, and I did it. So we're walking him through those levels of denial. There comes a point in time where we are able to match his prints while he's in there to the duct tape. And that becomes extremely important because up to that point, we're pretty sure he's in there. We feel very strongly he's involved, but you don't have physical evidence that puts him on the scene at the time. It's a tremendous confidence builder for the interrogators that they're in the right place, and now they could probably push a little harder because they know he was there, as opposed to pushing him to a place that they don't know the answer to.
We had been in there several hours. We approached it from different angles because he was not moving. And this guy was tough enough, we know. 6 detectives spoke to him and basically told him, we have you red-handed, and he still fucking denied it, Tom Bedell and I are talking, and we're trying to figure out another strategy. And Irma came into the room and she said, would you guys mind if I just went in there and talked to him just now while he's eating? And I was like, no, Irma, have at it. Fresh face. That's my thinking, like anything, just to, change up what's been going on.
Let a female go in there, see if you can soften him up. I don't know Andre Smith. I don't know who the person is that I'm interviewing till I sit down in front of them. And then I can more or less read them. I can read what they like, what triggers them. I go, you remind me so much of my brother Ruben, because he did. He reminded me of my brother Ruben a little bit. I'll talk to perpetrators more on a personal level and then go into an interrogation. And it works for me, because I kind of make them feel comfortable with me. But I've had prisoners who said, that Rivera smiled in my face and stabbed me in the back,
Irma has this ability to read the suspect and figure out where it is that she has to make her connection so that she can continue and get the answers that she needs.
I don't care if you're wearing a $5,000 suit or if you're homeless wearing like a pair of sweatpants and dirty sneakers. It doesn't make a difference to me. I treat everybody with respect. Everybody who's bad, there's still something good in them no matter what. You got to find that good spot in them when you interview them. How did you grow up? Oh yeah, I grew up the same way. I had nothing growing up. I didn't have toys when I was a kid. I didn't have Christmas sometimes. We didn't have food sometimes. I grew up in housing projects, so I could relate to them. Andre Smith was very polite. He was kind of like soft-spoken. He said he has a baby. Oh, you have a baby? I know that's gonna bring something soft in him. I use that.
All of a sudden, I just noticed these inflections. He picked his head up. He was engaged. He was listening to her. You could see like his eyes like kind of brightened up a little bit. She hit something like a nerve.
Then he told me that he did it because he needed to get diapers for his kid. That's when I thought that he was ready. I said to him, they're gonna come back in, they're great guys, they're my friends, whatever. You can talk to them, you can trust them.
Irma gave us the signal. I had to turn around, I interrupted Tommy Bedell because he was eating a fucking Suzy Q and drinking a Yoo-Hoo, which was his dinner of choice usually. I was like, hey, shithead, let's go. Dump that Susie Q and let's get back into this. Guy's changing up here. Let's go in there and take a hit.
This is an interrogation by a team at its best. Irma gets this real personal connection where he's ready to go. It's that tipping point where they're done with the denial and they're ready to vomit information.
He's nodding his head when I'm asking him questions. We were able to get Andre to speak, and he said he met Sean Sally in Newark through a mutual friend. And Sean Sally was saying how he was like kind of down on his luck, didn't have money, and brought about this plan to rob a weed spot in Manhattan. And then finally, Andre Smith gave an account anyway, the murders. He intended to go in there, rob the weed, rob the money. And he said, I even told the girl when she said, please don't hurt me, don't hurt my friends. And he said, I told her, that's not what I'm here for. She was bagging up the money and the weed for him, and he looked out, and Sally was struggling to get everybody taped up. So he went out and he said, here, you stay with her. Started to tape everybody, and then he said, you know, this guy just started shooting everybody.
Once we were into the written statement for the confession of Andre Smith, I get wind that the police commissioner took exception to me correcting his photographer. He also took exception to me showing up in shorts and a t-shirt. Within a day or two, I'm removed from the case by the police commissioner. I'm transferred to the 2-5 precinct in Harlem and detective squad there. Irma goes, take his name and put it on a piece of paper and put that piece of paper in your shoe and step on him every day for 10 days and it's all gonna work out.
This is my father's mother. She was into Santeria. She believed so much in that, you know? What she taught me was when anybody does anything wrong to you, she used to tell me, take a piece of paper, you put their name in it, and I know you're all gonna be doing this from now on. You take their name in it, you put their name in your shoe and you walk on them. And you walk on them and you tell them you want that person out of your path.
So it is hard to walk away because you kind of own it, but I can't be giving my thoughts or directions to detectives and undermining the new boss. Because now somebody else is responsible. If they call you up and ask for your advice, that's great, but you don't go calling them offering advice, right? And it's difficult for them too now because they know the police commissioner is mad at you. So they're not really interested in talking to you because they don't want your stink on them. So I forced myself to completely remove myself from the case. I don't even think I followed it too much in the media afterwards.
They killed 3 people, shot 2, execution style, for $2,800. The New York City Police Department has in custody at this time Mr. Andre Smith. To the second suspect responsible for these heinous crimes, who detectives have identified as Sean Sally. Make no mistake that the New York City Police Department will be relentless until he is in our custody alongside his accomplice. My suggestions is that he follow Andre Smith's lead and turn himself in at the nearest police station.
Andre Smith said that he left the apartment with Sean Sally. They went back to Newark, and that was the last time he saw Sean Sally.
We have to continue looking for Sean Sally. We got to get a phone number, find out who he's calling, and then track the phone. So what we were doing is we were tracking the cell sites. He had stopped in Louisiana.
We had a team of people, detectives and sergeant, down in New Orleans. Sally, he just seemed to be one step ahead.
At that point, you know, we just keep continuing, trying to see if we get phone information, but he got rid of his phone.
We had sort of run out of investigative leads.
We're still pursuing it, but, you know, now it's like 2 months, you know, the case goes cold.
We applied to have the case put on America's Most Wanted.
On July 14th, America's Most Wanted aired the Sean Sally Carnegi Deli homicide case in an effort to get some leads.
It's a national show, so it covers a tremendous amount of ground. and you've alerted the American public.
God bless America, that's what I want to say, because 20 minutes after that aired, people started calling in.
Someone in Florida recognized him and notified us.
And he was thought to be at a homeless shelter in Miami.
Miami gets contacted and right away, and they're like, hey, you need to go get this guy.
The detective from Miami was interviewing people at that homeless shelter. John Sally walked into the lobby and he bolted. The dogs tracked him down and cornered him in someone's backyard.
He was captured by a City of Miami canine officer. He did suffer a dog bite to the left forearm, but he was treated on the scene, and at this point we do have him in custody. He's facing 3 charges of first-degree murder and 1 charge of resisting arrest without violence.
Before he caught him, I was just like, every creak that I heard, I couldn't sleep through the night. I just thought that somebody was coming in. Once both of them were caught, it was relief.
The chief of Detective Bureau Manhattan at that time told me to go to Florida and do the interrogation on Sean Sally. I really feel that sometimes when people are on the run, it's kind of like a relief to get caught. He seemed that way. He seemed like he was a little bit relieved that he was caught, like, at that point. So then I interviewed him and asked him what happened, and he kind of like just gave it up.
They had gotten oral and written statements from him where he admitted killing Jennifer, although he said the gun went off and it was an accident. And he put the rest of the blame on Andre Smith for the people in the living room. The fact that he admitted pulling the trigger, accidentally or not, to killing Jennifer Stahl was significant. And it was significant because it doesn't matter in a prosecution for felony murder whether you intentionally or accidentally killed someone. In fact, it doesn't even matter whether the person died because you shot them or someone else shot them. If you participate in the underlying robbery, you are responsible under the law for the murders just as much as the person who pulled the trigger.
Philip King sat in the second row of the courtroom for his first face-to-face encounter with Sean Sally, one of the men who stands accused of murdering King's son, Stephen.
I just kept telling myself, restrain yourself, don't jump over the rail, and go for it.
I could see it, I could see what that man went through. I hope that's the relationship I have with my son. I'm getting a little choked up, I'm pretty sure I do, and that's the relationship I have with my father.
We're busy preparing and trying to get ready for court. It's a year or two later for you, but for that mother or that father or brother or sister, it's like it just happened yesterday.
It's a Tuesday. I'm with my children, dropping them off at school, and I hear that a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. I'm in jeans and a t-shirt. Because of my trouble that I ran into at the Carnegi Deli, I went home and put a suit on. I'm assuming that held me up maybe 20 minutes. I actually hear the second plane hit while I'm in my apartment.
It was true, like, when they say terror, it was like terror. Like, everybody was fucking, like, beyond anxious and frightened, and everybody that you saw.
It's unbelievable what took place there when it all collapsed. You never forget those things. And I lost some very good friends. I mean, it's a hard thing to talk about.
I survived September 11th. Perhaps that 20-minute change would have put me in a different location that would have came up with different results. And I kind of always accredited that lesson with having to put the suit on and not responding in street attire to saving my life.
People that died that day, you know, like God rest their memory, but it continued to kill people like for many years after. And 20 years later, I'm diagnosed with a 9/11 related cancer. The terrorists that did that got more bang for their buck, so to speak.
I was so wrapped up in 9/11. My office was turned upside down. That changed my life so radically, changed my work life, my personal life. It changed everything.
You know, we were all involved. We were all on the same day. We were all there, and we all felt like it was necessary to pick each other up and have each other's back. And we continued to do that. And then we just got back into work, and we did what we do well. And we continued that.
The trial was almost a year to the date of the murders. It was a very unique court case. I had never seen anything like that before. They were both on trial at the same time. They actually had two juries and the two defendants in the courtroom.
The saving grace of doing it this way was to avoid the surviving victims having to come back and relive this twice in the two separate trials. It's traumatic enough once.
I don't like to be the center of attention, and here I am in a box, you know, telling my story. I think I focused on my friend Francesca that was sitting there. It went with me. That kept me a little bit more grounded, I think.
The trial was a few weeks long. There were a lot of witnesses.
I wanted to understand what happened to Jen, what happened to her friends who she loved so much. Seeing those crime scene photos was way too much.
The one perpetrator said, oh, you know, when I was with Jennifer, I was guarding her with a gun and my hands were shaking and I was so afraid and I just wanted to get out of there and it accidentally went off. No, it did not. And the reason we know that is because Jennifer's head wound, the bullet wound, was a close contact wound. So don't tell me you were wiggling and shaking and it accidentally went off. No, you held it purposefully with full intent and you shot it. The evidence doesn't lie. People do. A lot.
When we heard the verdict for the Carnegie Deli, it was like a relief and a sense of pride, obviously. I was so happy because all the effort and on behalf of the people that passed away and Rosamund and Anthony that was still living and their families, everybody's families, they finally, now they had something, a little bit of closure.
The sleep was much easier to just say, you'll never see the light of day again.
Were people jumping up and down and celebrating? No, it was sort of a very quiet moment where I think people just
hugging and crying.
Of just like, okay, yeah. I mean,
justice has been served.
The passing of Jen, so many of us were affected, but we didn't know each other. And then we just eventually all connected. Every year after that tragedy, we celebrated Jen's life on her birthday.
General Jen Day.
She was such a good soul. She really was.
Irma's the one that called me and told me about the conviction, and I was very pleased to find out that there was a conviction. But it's not like winning the World Series or something like that. You're not elated because someone had to die for this to happen. It's a very strange, I don't know how to explain the feeling.
When I first became a cop, I started getting panic attacks. And the first time that I ever experienced one, I had 2 dead bodies in one day, and I had never been really exposed to death. Eventually, I learned how to shut my feelings on and off. I can actually visualize like a switch in my head, like a light switch, and I can go click, on, off, and I can shut it on and off. It's not that I don't care, it's just that you have no control what's gonna happen, so you learn to live a day at a time, and that's how I live, a day at a time.
These murders were just senseless. It brought me back to that first case where I really understood just how evil people could be. That was the Michael McMorrow case in 1997. It was so brutal, so over the top. One of the most disturbing crime scenes I ever saw. And I've seen thousands.
Here's a very intriguing story. It is the murder in 2009 of a young homosexual named Frederick Fleuron. He was killed by another homosexual with the complicity of a third homosexual for rather mysterious reasons, but which undoubtedly have to do with cruelty. In February 2009, a wine grower from Sérignan-dans-les-Roses, near Béziers, smells a strange smell. A smell of Sharon that comes from a well that he uses to irrigate his vineyards. So he leans over the well. In the background, he sees shoes coming off. There is a corpse in his well. When the police arrive, he looks around the well. He says, "Look at this." "What is this?" "It looks like a vital card cut into pieces." "And here you are, it's a bank card, the same. Let's see if you can read the name." The person has been missing since January 4th. The night has just fallen. We will remove the corpse from the well tomorrow. The next day, the corpse has come back. It is very damaged. There are no limbs, and especially the face is swollen. By the way, I have to explain to you. The well in question is equipped with a kind of endless screw to bring the water back to the surface. It is the screw, no doubt, that ripped the body. The gendarmes will show the baskets to the parents. Oh my God. Yes, these are his baskets, I think. So, who was this Frederick Fleuron? A priori a good guy, 31 years old. Seller in a car dealership during the day. Late at night. On January 4th, he called his mom. "I'm at my friend's. I'll call you back later." And he never called back. And his mom found it worrying right away. He wasn't doing too well lately. He had been out of work for a few months. Well, he had planned to start again. But no, it wasn't going well. What does it have to do with his disappearance? And his murder? The son-in-law lived in Béziers. At the time of his disappearance, his parents went to his house. They didn't find him, but they saw the mailbox. Well, we knew our son was gay. My husband didn't like it very much. But that's how it was. But we didn't know he was living with someone. There were two names on the mailbox. Frederick Tonk and Christopher. And when we went to report Frederick's disappearance to the Béziers police station, we told them about it. Because the police told them they knew the couple. That Frederick had recently laid hands on this Christopher. For violence. And now, we've just found Frederick in a well. We absolutely have to find this Christopher. We have to find him. In mid-January, the Béziers police station called their parents. That's it. And so, Christopher, 19 years old, found himself in front of the police station. I didn't steal it. I was just picking up my things. And why did you break the door? I didn't have the keys, that's all. And where is your friend Frederick? Do you know? No, we haven't been together with Frederick since New Year's Eve. That's why I came to pick up my things. New Year's Eve. Let's talk about it. While conducting their little investigation with Frederick's relatives, the police found out that it went very, very, very badly between the two of them that night. Well, on New Year's Eve, they went to a gay bar. And on the evening, Frederick had a good time with another boy. And that made Christopher crazy. He started to beat him up. And Frederick ended up in the emergency room. He was very angry. But how did Christopher meet him? Well, first of all, Christopher is a nice guy. He was homeless. And Frederick fell madly in love with him. And that's how Christopher settled in his house. And before we knew it, the violence started right away. No, at first it was a rosy life. For 3 months, I would say. They had a party, everything was going well. And then it degenerated. The other became completely crazy, jealous, possessive, and violent. That's it. It sounds clear, doesn't it? This Christopher has something to do with the death of Frederick. At this stage, the gendarmes could very well put him in custody. Cook him, put pressure on him, hoping he'll crack. But he decides to wait until they have enough biscuits to stick him to the wall. And from the biscuits, he hears a knock. A friend of Frederick who comes to see them. It was to tell you that one day, I talked to Christopher. And you know what he told me? No, I'm listening to you. He told me he wanted to kill Frederick. And that he was looking for a weapon for that. Well, who does it look like? Christopher killed Frederick. Meanwhile, where did Frederick Fleury's car go? A white E309. It's gone. It was found in the month of March at a farmer's house. Oh, but the guy fell into the ditch next to my house. I knew him a little bit. He had been a shepherd in the neighborhood. Not too long. He was not the type to be a shepherd. Unstable. And so I offered him to keep his car. And that they come to pick it up later. He never came back. And you know his name? Yes. He gave me his first name. Eric Meunier. Or something like that. I think he's from Avignon. That's a new name in the investigation. Well, not quite. Because the gendarmes have already interrogated him. In the first days. Because he's a friend of Frederick Fleury. And even from what they understood, one of his lovers. They interrogated him like any other victim's relative. Without suspecting him for a minute. And now he appears as a suspect. Because he stole the car. While until then, they thought that Christopher was the only one involved in the disappearance of Frederick Fleury. Maybe they were two. In the end. Well, it was worth waiting. Not to arrest Christopher right away. Especially since in the trunk of the 309, there are traces of blood. On top of that, Frederick Fleury's apartment has been robbed again. And this time, a lot of things have disappeared. The circuit board, the computer, the printer, the furniture. For once, it's a real robbery. And for the gendarmes, a surprise. This time, look, the door wasn't broken. So, well, the one who robbed the apartment had the keys. The parents say that Frederick had the keys to his apartment and the keys to his car in the same trunk. So, Eric Meunier, who stole the 309, also had the keys to Frederick's apartment. There are now two suspects in this case. Christopher and Eric Meunier. We are moving forward. Slowly. But we are moving forward. We are going to make Eric Meunier's phone call to see where he was the day Frederick Fleury disappeared. And once they reconstructed Eric Meunier's route that night, the gendarmes have the good idea to ask the police if Frederick Fleureau's 309 wasn't stolen that night as well. The car was stolen 8 times, several days in a row. So I compared it with Meunier's movements. Okay, did you see the photos to be sure it was him? Unfortunately, the photos were taken from the back. Okay, we are going to do 2 things. We are going to call Eric Meunier and we are going to put him on the phone. We are going to see if he panics. Excellent idea. When he receives his call from the gendarmes, Eric Meunier calls one of his friends, a certain Ludovic. Listen, it's exciting. The gendarmes start to panic. Immediately in hiding near the well, but his friend Ludo does not come. On the other hand, he calls back Eric Meunier. Hello? It's to tell you that everything is okay, nothing has moved, you can go quietly to your appointment. What's the point? An investigation, a feignance that did not take the trouble to go check what his friend asked him. In passing, note that a third man has just entered the suspect's waltz, this Ludovic, whose name has just been added to that of Christopher and that of Eric Meunier. So he would have put himself at 3 to kill Frederick? And so Eric Meunier lands confident in the gendarmerie. The corpse was not discovered, so he is waiting for a routine interrogation. And you can imagine that this is how it happens. The gendarmes do not drop any of their cards in front of him. They do not tell him about the corpse, or the 309, or the trace of his cell phone, or the radars that took pictures of him. It was, in a way, an interrogation to set a date. In the process, the investigators are again interested in Christopher. Why? Well, because he can't make the link between him and the other 2. Something is wrong. I won't keep the suspense any longer. Christopher had an alibi on the day of Frederick's disappearance. He was not involved in this case. Yes, he was violent with Frederick. Yes, he forced the door of his apartment. But it wasn't him who killed him. You see that in an investigation, you should never rush. Because from the beginning, I'm sure, you were certain that Christopher was the murderer. And me too, by the way. And the gendarmes too. A little. We ran away, guys. We ran away well. 3 months after the discovery of Frederick Fleuroutin's body in the well, Eric Meunier and Ludovic Serrat, it's time I give you his name, are placed in custody. And there, the gendarmes put everything on the table. The discovery of the body, the phone calls, the 309, the blood in the trunk, the radars, the trace of the body, they are stuck. And it's Eric Meunier who cracks the first. And what he tells is a terrifying cynicism. He didn't kill him by chance, by a contest of circumstances. He wanted to kill him. Well, on the evening of January 4th, we made him drink, we kept him, until he was completely drunk. And when he was completely stiff, I put him in the car and I left. With Ludovic Serrat. No, he stayed. And then? Well, then I went to Sérignan and I stopped at a place I know. I had worked in the area as a shepherd. In short, I took him out of the car, I started to mangane him a little pim-pam, and then I put a strap around his neck. The other one was giggling like crazy. And I pushed him into the well. Crazy. And his friend Ludovic Serrat, what does he say? I didn't know he was going to kill him. In short, when he came in, Eric told me, you have to see this, you have to see the body in the well. So we went there. And we did well, because frankly, in the well, we could see the corpse too much. There wasn't enough water. So we threw branches and parpins on it. And that's it. What I hear, sir, behind all this, is that your friend Meunier wanted to kill Floro Frederick. Yes, it's true. It's true that he's been talking about it for a while. He even dug a hole to put his corpse in. And then he chose the well. So it would be a murder. A premeditated murder. And is this the first time that your friend Menir, Eric, took on someone like that? He already took on a young man 5 or 6 years ago, I think, in Avignon. If I remember correctly, he bombed him with stones. I was there. And the other one jumped into the water. I don't think he's still alive. A second murder in Avignon 6 years ago. The gendarmes searched the computer archives. No trace. So they called the local police. Yes, in 2004. A young homosexual who jumped into the water and possibly drowned. I don't see anything at all. And for good reason. 6 years ago, the Roquemort gendarmes were caught in this case. But since it was a PD story, a scam story, they let it go. The truth. In 2003, French gendarmes forgot to investigate a case on the pretext that the victim was a homosexual. And a young black man. Who else? This case is a scandal. And so I have to tell you about it. Because at the time, if the gendarmes had gone to the end, they would have arrested Meunier and Surratt. And Frederic Fleury would still be alive. This story begins like a nightmare one night in November 2003 on the island of La Partolis in Avignon. A couple of inhabitants of the island hear in the middle of the night a man shouting to death. They want to kill me. So they get up. Their dog never barks for nothing. And there, outside, they see a young black man in a sleeveless shirt, cold as ice, with blood running down his head. So they open the door. They let him in. They set it on fire. They put a log in it. The guy said his name was Wilfred. What happened to you, Wilfred? I was attacked by 2 men. They beat me up and threw stones at me. But why did they want these men? Because I'm black and homosexual. Well, I think. All right. We'll call the gendarmes. Warm up in the meantime. I'll bring you a blanket. When the gendarmes arrive, Wilfred tells them that this story began before. In the evening, at a place of homosexual drugs called Bonpas, where he found a boy he knew and his name was Eric. We went to a field together too. Well, you know. A few minutes later, a car arrived. I asked Eric who it was. What's going on? He said to me, "You're going to die. I'm going to kill you." Then he told me to get out of the car. There was another guy outside. They both started beating me up. Then they put me in their car and took me to the island of Barthelès. When we got here, I don't know why, they started throwing big stones at me. I didn't have a choice. I dived into the Rhone. I waited. I think they thought I was dead. So they left. I waited a little longer. And here I am. I came all the way here to get help. That night, Wilfried gave all the information to the police to arrest the attackers. Eric's phone number, which he had already seen, and the registration plate of the other guy's car. And he filed a complaint. But the police didn't move. Wilfried called them again, several times. "Sorry, sir, we can't tell you anything. You know, we have much more important things to deal with." More important than what? Than a young homosexual who almost got killed? In any case, the police were wrong not to be interested in this story. Because the 2 bastards who wanted to kill Wilfried started again 6 years later by killing Frederic Fleury. In this case, we have both genius gendarmes, those of the hero who skillfully carried out the investigation on the murder of Frederick. And next to that, some brats who neglected an investigation because the victim was black and homosexual. Eric Manier and Ludovic Serra are therefore examined in both files. Once for murder and another time for attempted murder. Except that in the following months, Manier changes version. He accuses his fellow Ludovic of the murder and he gives himself a secondary role. The duo has just fallen apart. From now on, it's each for himself. There is still a huge mystery in this double case. Why? Why did these two guys want to kill Wilfried? And why did they kill Frederick on purpose? To try to answer the question, the gendarmes will drag, and civilian of course, on the places of drugs they both frequented. And it's very sad. Eric, we knew him well here. He came often. He didn't have a very good reputation. He could become violent in a minute. Look at him. Between us, I think he liked to watch. Very instructive. The leader would be Manier and Serra would be a follower. Before going to the trial of this devilish duo, what can I tell you about Eric Manier? What made him so aggressive, so sadistic? Why did he take so much violence to two boys who had done nothing to him? First, there is a medical track. Eric Manier was born with a hydrocephaly, that is to say a too big head. And it led to behavioral disorders. He spent all his schooling in an institute far from his family. And then Manier is fragile. Since childhood, he attempted suicide at 12 years old and many others after. Finally, Manier experienced a huge trauma. One morning in 2002, his big brother hanged himself on a tree in front of their building. He never got out of it. That's it. We will see if these undeniable traumas will weigh in front of the jury. The trial opens in February 2013 in front of the Montpellier Assembly. And it is confirmed from the beginning that it will be each for himself. Eric Manier tells him from the first day, "I did not kill Frederick Floro. It was Ludovic who killed him." And then, something very rare happens. Manier's lawyer, Master Derrigain, asks his client to speak. "You can't go on like this. You have to assume. Think of your brother and what happened to him. Do it for him. Tell the truth. Be brave." And it works. Eric Manier speaks to the president. "I killed Frederick Floro." That's rare. A lawyer who brings his client to confession. Or did Manier kill him to please him? The Attorney General imagines that there is a contract between the two. We can perfectly imagine that Sarah told him, "Do you want to have lovers, Eric? Well, put them to death in front of me." It's a clue. Attractive. But is it the truth? Another strong moment of this trial, the testimony of the gendarme who neglected the 2003 case. The assassination attempt on Wilfried. Since then, I assure you, he has been fired from the gendarmerie. We learned that he had put about 40 procedures under the rug. It's true, I didn't transfer this case to the Attorney General. It's because I had a lot of it. And he too, let's tell the truth, by lack of professionalism. The verdict 7 days after the trial, Eric Manier is consecrated as having played the first role in both cases. He is sentenced to 30 years of criminal reclusion. Ludovic Serra is not absurd, however. He is sentenced to 25 years. To comment on his story of the day, Christophe Andelade receives a guest direct actor of his story. And to debrief this story, here you are, Jean-Marc Derrigade, from the Barreau de Montpellier. You were Eric Manier's lawyer. I just put you on stage during the trial. So, The verdict is about Manier and the driver and not Sarah. Does it fit for you? It was a bit the analysis of the two psychiatric experts committed by the magistrate who talked about a criminal couple in which one and the other took the ascended according to their capacities, but the natural leader was Manier for his charm and the seduction he had towards Ludovic Serra. The witnesses found in the places of Drake and who say Ludovic is his tutu. There was a functioning that was described like that of this couple who always had the same functioning with a great impulsivity of Eric and Ludovic who let him do it or even lend him a strong hand. And we had succeeded. Even the investigators had updated several incidents, some quite serious. Sorry to ask you the question like that, but the great disadvantage of my job is that I don't know the people I'm talking about. You know very well Manier and you saw Sarah at the trial. Tell me how you can place them. With which words would you place them one compared to the other? The contrast between the two is striking. Eric Manier, if you want, is a child, a young man. We would have said that he was stuck in adolescence with a slightly confused look. He arrived at his trial dressed in OM clothes with the OM effigies and Ludovic Serra. He came from a somewhat bourgeois family with a balanced education and well-off parents. These two completely different people were united by their emotional encounter, which is not described by either of them in the same way. Absolutely. It's a meeting between two men who are not the same age. One is an adult, the other is still a minor, and then Manier will end up evoking a meeting which was actually a rape. He will denounce a rape and then this couple will have sex. A rape in which Sarah was the driver and he invited him. That's exactly what he said, but it was of course contested by Sarah, and what we could say is that they then stayed together and they had a friendly relationship. But Manier is an idiot because to arrive at his trial with an OM effigy in front of the jury, you have to be really stupid. And I suppose that you, his lawyer, you suggested him another outfit. If you want, Eric Manier is a child. He's really a child. He was blocked. We asked him questions, he answered with a disconcerting naivety. He was sometimes astonished. He seemed to trivialize what he had done, but it's because he was blocked in a mental age, perhaps caused by his hydrocephalus, by childhood traumas, I don't know. But he was completely childish. It's not stupidity? It's a mix of both, yes. Because it had nothing to do with the Nobel Prize. On the other hand, Ludovic Serra was much more intelligent, but completely under the physical and carnal influence of Eric Manier. So now, this question that I'm sure a lot of listeners are asking themselves. Is it really the role of a lawyer to make his client confess at the trial? If you want, it's not necessarily the role, but it's perhaps also a function that consists of helping the one who is judged to make a path to the victim and to his own truth to be able to rebuild himself. The experts, they had named a duo of experts, or rather of renown, among them Dr. Coudenceau, who spoke of a criminal couple. That is to say, the two beings functioned as a duo. Indeed, it gives the impression that one is satisfied with the harm done by the other and vice versa, and they maintain themselves in a criminal logic. Because the motives of crimes are futile for Fleuron, his car, his computer. We feel that it is something else perhaps that drives them. What about sadism, in the sexual sense of the term? It could be something like that. We could never really establish it. You should know that the investigators updated their geographical trajectory. They updated another tomb that had been dug next to Mazet and Serignan. And we never knew for whom this tomb had been dug. They never wanted to say. They suspected that their trajectory was much more criminal than what was discovered. That is to say, they were already killed or they were planning to do it. Absolutely. In his hearings, the one who was the victim of the attempted murder in 2003 made this prophetic remark. He had lent his words to Meunier, who would have told him, "I'm going to kill you. You are not the first and you will not be the last." So there is the track of the Attorney General. I find it interesting. That is to say, she considers that basically, Sarah said to Meunier, "Okay, you have lovers, okay, you want to have lovers, but the lover's in front of me." Does it hold? It is a hypothesis that is indeed plausible. It has not been. In the absence of confession, in the sense of the two men, we cannot know, but it is true that there is a scenario that occurred twice, where they are seen acting in concert to lead someone to death. We can wonder about the reasons for which they will behave like that. Because in this scenario of the Attorney General, the engine is Sarah. But in the analysis of psychiatry experts, it was Sarah, the most intelligent character, and therefore he, the intellectual leader. After, he put them a little in balance because Meunier exerted an almost carnal fascination that made him dependent. But it is certain that Meunier, Eric Meunier, said the shepherd, that's how it was called, he did not have the capacity to manage, he did not have the intelligence, he did not have the leadership. It was really a man stuck in an infantile state. That's what the verdict says, by the way, when he gives 25 years to Sarah, whose role is just to have watched, is that we give him a little role too? Yes, anyway, in both cases, Sarah had a more than active role, a role of complicity. Then it was the elder, it was the one who had the mastery, he could have prevented all that, and therefore controlled the impulsivity of Meunier, which he never did obviously. From the moment the trial of cease, Meunier recognizes that he is the one who killed. Does it release the word of Sarah? Do we understand better or not? Not really, because Sarah, he will observe an attitude where he will try to reject everything, the responsibility on Meunier. He will try to exonerate himself, so he will push a little because he too will not assume his share of responsibility, so we will never know the real functioning of this duo. What is Meunier's original trauma? Because there are still clues, so we have hydrocephaly, you said a word about it earlier. There are behavioral disorders that result from hydrocephaly and are worth their place in institutes up to their majority, and then there is the suicide of his brother. And the suicide attempts that he himself made. The big trauma, the motor trauma, the thing that is at the base of everything, what is it? What is at the base of everything is especially the image he kept. First it was fusional with his brother, and then one day he describes this scene where through the window of his room he sees the hanging body of his brother on a tree. It is him who will hang him. It is a scene that he has a hard time evoking. So we feel that he was stuck at that moment, and he is in a family where we are quite miserable. It is total indifference, and so it is a child who will not be surrounded. Who will not be sufficiently. He will be thrown into the IME, and he will grow a little like that, a kind of crazy grass that will never be controlled. That's why he does not take perpetuity. A word anyway on this Avignon gendarme, I don't know, next to Avignon, who hides 40 files including the file of Ludovic. You had the opportunity to see him at the Court of Assistance. What happened to this gentleman? What did you understand? So we understood that he would have done a kind of burnout, that's what he claimed, that he would have neglected 49 procedures, that he would have stayed locked up in boxes. What is surprising is that among these procedures there was, for example, a triple unintentional homicide, that is, an accident on the road that had caused 3 deaths. And what we can't stop understanding is how the families of the victims did not show up, how this procedure did not come out. So there is no strategist of this man, it's a guy who blows up. Is it possible when you're a gendarme? Yes, it's possible. I think at first everyone thought it could be linked to the fact that it was a procedure for homosexuals that we didn't care about, that maybe it was a homophobe who was hiding in the end. Later we discovered a man completely destroyed, who had carted a little all kinds of procedures. But what is disappointing is that we realized, by opening the procedure, that the phone numbers were exactly the same. So we thought it was enough to call them, they would come and maybe we would stop everything. And that neither Florent was alive and that Munir and Sarah did not take such heavy penalties. They were controlled, managed, and maybe they were corrected even before something worse happened. Thank you very much, Master Daraga Dubaro of Montpellier, for accepting the debriefing of this story with so many franchises and finesse of analysis.